In this video, we will show you how to replace your starter on the Chevy Silverado with a 4.3-liter engine. This will be located under your vehicle along the passenger side of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to mention is we are going to have to make our way safely under the front of the vehicle, so make sure you're in a safe area to do so. After that, go ahead and open the hood and look for the battery. We'll be disconnecting the negative battery terminal from the battery and set it aside so it's making no contact. And now we can safely make our way underneath the passenger side of the vehicle. Under the vehicle, along the passenger side of the engine, is where you're going to find the starter. We'll start by removing the two 13mm headed mounting bolts that hold the starter to the engine. Keep in mind there are wiring harnesses that lead to the starter, which we will disconnect once this is dislodged. Remove and inspect the mounting hardware. As for the first one, we're going to start it back in just a couple threads. There's our second bolt. That looks good as well. Let's take hold of that starter and remove our bolt. As you remove the starter, you're going to have to pull it forward and then you can start bringing it down. Once again, paying attention to that wiring, we don't want to cause any damage. At this point, we have clear access to the wiring harnesses along this area of the starter. When disconnecting the wiring harnesses, we'll start with the wiring closest to us. It's the smallest wiring harness, and we're going to be using an 8mm to remove the mounting nut. Once you do have that wire dislodged, give it a quick inspection. If it looks like there's any corrosion, you're going to want to take care of that. Give the hardware a quick inspection. The new starter comes with new hardware, so we'll recycle this properly. Looking at the wire, once again, we're making sure that there isn't any corrosion on this area, and you also need to make sure that the wiring itself is not damaged or frayed. If it seems like it's weak, you also want to make sure that you fix or replace that. Let's continue on to the 13mm headed mounting nut holding the larger wire in place. As you remove this, keep in mind it's the last thing holding the starter to the vehicle. Don't let it fall and potentially hurt you. With the starter out of place, let's continue on with removing the heat shield from around this area. It's going to be fairly simple overall. You can go ahead and take hold of it and slide it out of place. If it's stuck on there, you could use a small prying device. A quick inspection of that shield, you will be reusing it, and now you can set your starter aside for recycling. Before we install the brand new starter, it's important to make sure that you clean up the wiring harnesses and the mounting surface where your brand new starter will mount. As for the connectors, once again, we're paying attention for corrosion and also rust. Looking at this area, I can tell that it does have buildup on it. We want to make sure we have a clean surface on both sides of each one of the connector. You can go ahead and use a piece of sandpaper for this. Okay, we've got both ends of both of the wiring harnesses cleaned up. Okay, we've got both sides of both of the wiring harnesses cleaned up. Now let's clean up the base of the engine where that new starter will sit. We'll just use a scraper, whatever you might happen to have, to remove as much debris from the mating surface as possible. Okay friends, let's prepare for installation of our brand new starter. Before we put this in place, let's make sure that we install our heat shield. Looking at the heat shield itself, you can tell that you do have the locking tabs making their way around, but you have this extended area of the shield itself. That extended area is supposed to protect the wiring harnesses, so we'll make sure that we align this and slide it into place. Go ahead and listen for a click from that. Once you've done so, we'll continue on with our wiring harnesses. We'll start with the larger wiring harness here. Go ahead and put that right in place on the starter stud. After that, you want to continue on with your locking washer and that mounting nut. Bottom out the mounting nut and then torque that to 80 inch-pounds. Get our torque wrench. Now it's time for the smaller wiring harness here. We'll get this in place. You know exactly what to do. We're going to start with the locking washer first. Once you have that on there, start on the mounting nut. The torque for this is only 30 inch-pounds. You want to be very careful not to break it. Our locking washer. Mounting nut. Right there feels as though it wanted to bottom out for me. As I mentioned, we don't want to over torque this. I'm only going to take it a little bit further just to ensure that this is properly secured. A loose connection will cause a starting issue. Once you feel as though you have everything tight, go ahead and give it a quick wiggle. Assuming it's fine, we'll continue on with the installation of our starter, putting it up in place and starting each of those two mounting bolts. I've cleaned the threads and the shaft on each one of my two mounting bolts. To get this in position, you're going to want to come up, slide it towards the front of the vehicle, line it up with the transmission port, and then you should be able to slide it rearward into the proper placement. There we are. A little bit of a tight fit here. Once you feel as though you have it in the proper placement, we'll start in each of those bolts. With both of these started in, we'll snug them up and then you can torque these to 32 foot-pounds. One last check while we're under this area, and we can make our way safely back up to that battery. We'll get this negative battery terminal in place, started on by hand so you're sure you are not cross-threading it. Once you do have it started, go ahead and make sure that it's nice and snug. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. At this point, you can go ahead and close the hood, hop in the passenger compartment, and start the vehicle a couple of times. Once you're sure it functions properly, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.